Most people believe that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's a comforting idea. It suggests that we are at heart sensible creatures, that we recognize danger when we see it, and that we know better than to accept gifts that come without cost. But every so often something presents itself so simply, so reasonably, that refusing it feels almost foolish. A small document, a single signature, one wish, nothing more. The account you are about to hear concerns a man who was not easily deceived, a professional in fact trusted with matters of discretion and importance, a man who prided himself on caution, and yet even he came dangerously close to accepting an offer that required almost nothing and promised everything. This is what happened when he didn't. A Gentleman's Agreement, written and read by Christopher Halton. Some 24 years ago I was employed as a private messenger, having established a reputation among solicitors, bankers and merchants for the discreet, reliable and expeditious conveyance of letters and parcels in matters often of a delicate and confidential nature. Although it was the year 1880 and the postal system might generally be relied upon, there remained occasions when it was judged preferable to ensure by hand and under trusted supervision that documents sometimes of great importance and at times accompanied by money or other valuables reached their intended recipient without loss or interference. Trust in such cases was the principal consideration. It was in this capacity that I was summoned to the offices of R. H. Henderson and Company, solicitors of some standing in central London, upon a matter of the gravest trust. There I made the acquaintance of the proprietor, Mr. Reginald Henderson, in his rather sumptuous rooms in Mayfair. He received me with a degree of visible agitation, and after a moment's hesitation, unlocked a drawer in his desk, from which he produced a small packet, no more at first glance than a manila envelope, though heavily padded within and secured by string, the fastening impressed with a seal of red wax. Before placing it in my possession, he said, "Mr. Davis, you come to me most strongly recommended for your reliability, promptness and discretion. This packet must be conveyed with all possible urgency to Hinchcliffe House near Bailey in Worcestershire and delivered into the hands of the addressee, Lord Gossington. He will furnish you with a signed acknowledgment of receipt, which you will return to me here at the earliest opportunity. Upon your completion of this service, I shall pay you 3 gold sovereigns together with your expenses." He paused, then, opening a small purse, placed 2 sovereigns in my hand. "I offer this in advance," he continued, "as a mark of my confidence, and in the expectation that you will set out at once, so as to ensure delivery within a few days." Having thus entrusted me with both packet and coin, he regarded me steadily and said, "I have your word, Mr. Davis, that you will undertake this charge faithfully." I inclined my head. "Sir, as a former officer of the 21st Regiment of Foot, I trust my word will suffice." At this he appeared sensibly relieved. "Very good. I shall expect your return and the receipt within the next week." He then rose, conducted me to the door of his rooms, and with a final word of courtesy, took his leave of me. I returned at once to my apartment some miles distant, and having packed a small travelling bag, set out without delay for the railway station. There I took the train from Paddington to Worcester Shrub Hill, a journey of somewhat more than 4 hours, arriving in the late afternoon. It was early April, the sky lay overcast, and the country through which we passed presented a dull and colourless aspect, as though still burdened by the effects of a recent and heavy rain. I was fortunate to find, awaiting my arrival, a gig, though the coachman who attended it regarded me with a certain reserve, which deepened perceptibly when I gave him my destination, Hinchcliffe House. "Why do you wish to go there, sir?" he said. "It is not a place much visited. Indeed, I cannot say that any reside there at all." After a moment he added more darkly, "I will set you down at the entrance to the drive, but no farther. I have no wish to go up to the house." I offered him an increased fare if he would convey me the whole distance, but he would not be persuaded. The gate, he insisted, was as far as he was prepared to go, nor would he enlarge upon his reason save to remark, with a certain reluctance, that the place bore a reputation which he did not care to test for himself. And so we set off with the glum coachman arriving at the gate some 40 minutes later. I paid him the fare with a much smaller tip and set off on foot to complete the rest of the journey. The drive was around a mile long. Initially the stone road looked very worn, with holes and an undulating surface, and the greensward on either side was overgrown with self-seeded sapling trees. It was at this point that I could appreciate the coachman's reluctance, as it seemed the estate was long abandoned by man. After some quarter of a mile, however, the greensward gave way to a stretch of closely tended lawn, its edges cleanly kept and free of encroachment, and the road itself, to my surprise, improved markedly, presenting a smooth and well-maintained surface. It was at this point that I first caught sight of Hinchcliffe House, a fine Jacobean mansion of the 17th century, built of stone and set about by a moat. It was approached by a substantial bridge, an addition, I judged, of the following century, which gave access to a neatly ordered courtyard before the principal entrance. The windows were of the older kind, stone-mullioned and leaded, and the whole presented an aspect of careful preservation, if not of recent occupation. As I entered the courtyard, somewhat fatigued from my journey, a gentleman in the dress of a valet approached and said, "You are expected, sir. Pray follow me." I followed close behind this formal personage, whose appearance, his white periwig and green-skirted coat, put me in mind of an earlier century. Such attire was not wholly unknown upon certain estates, and I therefore gave the matter no particular consideration. I was conducted into a large drawing-room, its windows obscured by heavy draperies, and furnished with several pieces of bullwork, whose elaborate brass inlay and ormolu mounts, though undeniably fine, struck me as somewhat excessive. I was invited to take a seat on a bergère chair, part of a suite upholstered in gold and yellow, with a matching settee. Everything upon which my eye fell was in keeping with the taste of the 18th century, of a quality, no doubt, that had once been considered exceptional, though now perhaps somewhat removed from modern fashion. It was at this moment that a gentleman dressed in modern fashion entered the room. He wore a black morning coat with a wing collar and neatly tied cravat, and presented an appearance at once elegant and austere. Of some 60 years and of lean habit, he bore himself with an air of quiet authority that suggested complete command of both himself and his surroundings. I rose to greet him, but he regarded me only briefly and with a certain froideur before saying, "I am Gossington. You have something for me from Henderson, I believe." I handed him the packet, whereupon he, without remark, passed me a signed acknowledgment of receipt, already enclosed within an envelope. "You will return this to Henderson," he said, "and you may tell him that this is the last occasion upon which I shall oblige him in this matter. He will understand me." He then broke the seal and examined the contents, raising a gold-rimmed monocle to his eye. The packet contained several documents bearing different signatures. He remarked, "I expected more than this, much more." Turning to me, he said, "Tell Henderson he may well receive a visit. This is not in accord with our agreements." I inclined my head. "My lord, I am but the bearer of the message, and have no knowledge of your affairs with Mr. Henderson. I was instructed only to obtain your acknowledgment and to return to London at once with it. In such matters you may rely upon my discretion." "You know, Mr. Davis," he said, "I could make you a wealthy man, rich beyond any expectation you might reasonably entertain. Indeed, there is very little you might desire that could not be placed within your reach." "And what would be required of me?" I asked. He smiled slightly. Very little. You would have only to complete a short declaration, affix your signature, and place it in my hands. That is all." "And the condition," said I, "that you should in your turn introduce others to the same opportunity, and invite them to do likewise. I assure you, whatever they may wish for shall be granted." "And what is it that you derive from such an arrangement, my lord?" I inquired. He regarded me with evident satisfaction. "The greatest of pleasures, the knowledge that so many have seen fit to join my association." For my own part, I was not in want. My affairs were in tolerable order, and I enjoyed such comforts as were sufficient to my station. Moreover, I did not trust Lord Gossington. There was something in the nature of his offer which set me immediately on my guard. The uneasiness I had observed in Mr. Henderson's manner served only to confirm my suspicion that all was not as it ought to be. "Might I take the document away with me," I said, "and place it before Mr. Henderson for his consideration? I do not doubt that it is in proper form, yet I have found it prudent in such matters to proceed with some caution." He regarded me for a moment with a look of mild surprise, perhaps even suspicion, being, I thought, unaccustomed to any hesitation in the acceptance of his generosity. Then, recovering himself, he replied in a more measured tone, "Yes, certainly, I see no objection to that. I shall be in London within a fortnight. We may then meet again and bring the matter to its proper conclusion." It did not escape my notice that he addressed me by name, though I had not given it, and I could not suppose that Henderson had communicated with him in the brief interval of my journey. For the moment, however, I allowed the matter to pass without remark. I judged it unwise to remain upon the estate, and arrangements were accordingly made for a pony and trap to convey me back to the station, where I took the late train to Paddington, arriving home without further incident. On the following day I waited upon Henderson and placed the sealed envelope in his hands. He broke it open with some impatience, read its contents, and then appeared sensibly relieved. He paid me the balance of the agreed sum, together with an additional sovereign for my expenses. I returned to my rooms that evening, with the additional sovereign heavy in my pocket, yet my mind was heavier still. Sleep came only fitfully, and the following morning I resolved to satisfy my curiosity before Lord Gossington's promised arrival in London. The reading room of the London Library in St. James's Square was quiet as usual, its long tables lit by tall windows that admitted a grey reluctant light. I requested first Burke's Peerage for the year 1878, and then such volumes of county history as might speak of Worcestershire estates. The assistant, a pale scholarly fellow named Mr. Elmes, brought them without comment. Only when I spoke the name Gossington did his manner alter. He paused, one hand still resting upon the leather-bound volume he had just laid before me. "Gossington, sir, the extinct barony." I nodded. Mr. Elmes gave me a look I could not quite interpret, something between professional caution and genuine unease. "You will find the entry brief, I fear. The last lord died in 1780. There has been no claimant since." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "If you are inquiring on behalf of a client, you may wish to inform them that the title is quite beyond revival." I thanked him and turned to the page. The entry was indeed short. "Gossington Baron, extinct 1780. Sir Charles Henry Gossington, fourth and last Baron, died without issue at Hinchcliffe House, County Worcester, 12th October 1780. Nothing more." I next opened the Worcestershire volume. There, between descriptions of Hartlebury and the Clent Hills, I found a steel engraving dated 1812. "Hinchcliffe House, seat of the late Lord Gossington." The artist had rendered a melancholy scene. Roofless walls open to the sky, the moat choked with reeds, the bridge half collapsed, and ivy thick as rope about the ruined mullions. A solitary crow perched upon a broken chimney. Beneath the plate ran the caption, "Now falling fast into decay," and let to a neighbouring farmer for the grazing of cattle. I sat for some time staring at that image. The house I had visited scarcely 2 days earlier, its courtyard swept, its lawns tended, its windows whole and gleaming, bore no resemblance to this spectral wreck. Yet the engraving was precise in every recognisable detail. The same Jacobean gables, the same position of the bridge, even the ancient oak that still stood, though far younger in the picture, at the head of the drive. When Mr. Elmes returned to collect the books, he found me still studying the plate. He glanced at it, then at me, and for a moment I thought he might speak. Instead, he closed the volume gently, as one might close a coffin lid, and said only, "Some places, sir, are best left to their own history." I left the library shortly afterwards with a mind considerably disturbed. The house I had visited scarcely 2 days earlier, its courtyard swept, its lawns tended, its windows whole and gleaming, could not be reconciled with the ruin described in every account I had consulted. Nor could I dismiss the fact that the name of Gossington belonged, by all reliable record, to a line long since extinguished. Whoever this man might be, I could not persuade myself that he belonged wholly to the ordinary course of things. And so 2 weeks passed when I received an invitation to a private members' club room to meet with Lord Gossington. More from curiosity than any inclination to entertain his proposal, I attended that evening. We dined together with a degree of formality, after which he conducted me to a private room, removed from the hearing of other members or servants. There, seating himself with evident ease in an upholstered chair, he motioned for me to do likewise. "Well, Mr. Davis, or should I say Max," he said with a faint, knowing smile, "you have, I think, formed a rather particular impression of me." I made no reply. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and confiding, almost affectionate. "You take me, I think, for some vulgar tempter, a creature of melodrama and stained bargains. But you mistake me. I know your kind, Mr. Davis, a man of honour, of discretion, and of abilities better recognised by others than rewarded. Such men are often the easiest to overlook, and the most deserving of consideration." He let the words settle between us. "You have carried other men's secrets for 20 years, risking much and receiving little. You have no wife, no children, no prospect of ease in your later years. Only a modest set of rooms and the respect of solicitors who would forget you tomorrow if you cease to be useful. I offer you something far simpler and far more personal." From the inner pocket of his coat he drew the document I had first seen at Hinchcliffe House. He unfolded it with deliberate care and laid it before me on the small table, turning it so that I might read. The paper was thick and creamy, and it bore no printed heading. At the top, in a fine copper-plate hand, were only these words: "I, the undersigned, do freely bind myself and all that is mine, in this world and the next, to the service of the association." Below that was a space for a name, and beneath it another blank line marked desideratum, the thing desired. Gossington tapped the second line lightly with one manicured finger. "You need to write only what you truly want, Max. A comfortable independence, a respected name, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that those who once looked down on you now look up. Perhaps even the restoration of something you lost long ago." His eyes met mine. "You have only to set it down in your own hand. The rest, as they say, follows of itself." He smiled again, not broadly, but with the gentle assurance of a man who already knew the ending of the story. I rose from my chair. "My lord," I said, "I thank you for your hospitality and for the frankness of your offer, but I must decline it. I have lived thus far by my own efforts and my own good name. I have no wish to bind either to any association whose nature I do not fully understand." For a moment his expression did not change. Then the smile deepened, almost with approval. "An honourable refusal," he murmured. "How refreshing. Very well, Mr. Davis. Should you ever reconsider, you have only to send word." He rose and offered me his hand. I took it. A mistake, perhaps. His grip was cool, dry, and strangely lingering. I left the club that night convinced I had acted wisely. I sent a courteous note the following morning declining any further association. In the weeks that followed, I congratulated myself upon my prudence. Then the small favours began. A letter arrived from Messrs. Carstairs and Lowell in the Temple, a firm I had courted without success for nearly 3 years, requesting my regular services at nearly double my former rate. They spoke warmly of excellent reports of your discretion received from several valued clients. 2 days later, my landlord, previously inflexible on the subject of rent, informed me that he had reconsidered the terms in light of my long and faithful tenancy and reduced my monthly payment by a full sovereign. Even Mrs. Higgs, my notoriously ill-tempered laundress, began returning my shirts and collars pressed to a perfection I had never known, and refused any additional charge. I told myself these were happy coincidences. But coincidences rarely arrive in such neat succession. Old Mr. Whittaker, a rival messenger whose territory had overlapped my own for more than a decade, was found dead in a narrow court off Fleet Street. The coroner recorded heart failure. He had been seen only the week before carrying a sealed packet for R.H. Henderson and Company. At his sparsely attended funeral in Kensal Green, I noticed 2 quiet, well-dressed gentlemen standing a little apart from the others. Their faces were unfamiliar, yet I felt certain I had glimpsed them before. Perhaps in the shadow corners of Hinchcliffe House. Each new comfort that came to me seemed to cast a longer shadow elsewhere. My distant cousin Algernon Davis, a man I had met perhaps twice in my life, died quite suddenly in his house in Tunbridge Wells, leaving me £450 and a small collection of silver. The solicitor handling the estate remarked how unexpected the bequest had been, as Algernon had often spoken of me with irritation. Within a fortnight of receiving the money, I was offered the lease of a more comfortable set of rooms in a better part of Marylebone at a rate I could now easily afford. I began to keep a private ledger of these occurrences. On the credit side, increased income, better lodgings, respect from men who had once treated me as little better than a servant. On the debit side, the sudden illness of a banker whose documents I had once carried, the bankruptcy of a merchant who had refused Henderson's services, the quiet withdrawal from society of several former clients. I had not signed the paper, I had not written a single word upon it. Yet the association, it appeared, had begun to keep its accounts in my name all the same. One grey October evening, almost 6 months after my visit to Worcestershire, I received a short note from Henderson. It contained no packet, only a single line. "He tells me you are proving most satisfactory. R.H." I burned the note in the grate, but the flames gave me no comfort. Last night I dined alone in my new rooms. The fire burned brightly, the wine was excellent, and for the first time in many years I felt a deep and genuine contentment. As I sat in my armchair, however, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the mantelpiece. For a moment, no more than the space of a heartbeat, the face that looked back at me was not entirely my own. The eyes were colder, the smile thinner, and behind them moved something ancient and patient that regarded me with quiet satisfaction. Although I have not signed the document, I begin to fear that the association no longer requires my signature, and worse still, I am no longer certain that I wish to refuse it. The end. If you enjoy this kind of restrained, intelligent horror, where the unease builds quietly and lingers, you can find more in my collections, Haunted Houses and Unquiet Places, and The Black Library and Other Unsettling Tales, available now on Amazon.